Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Bellingham Public Works Public Safety Committee to order. We've got quite a few items before us today. Actually, 8 of them, I think, so we should get started. Who's going to wants to start on this first item? Oh, the first item is an authorization to close out an existing remedial action grant agreement and enter into a new grant agreement with the Washington State Department of Ecology for partial funding of the remediation of the R.G. Haley site. And joining me on the committee this morning is Michael Lilliquist and Roxanne Murphy. And thank you, Jack, for joining us too.
Good morning. I'm Amy Cram from the legal department. We have received or are about to receive $1 million increase in our grant for the R.G. Haley cleanup site. And in order to incorporate those new funds into our agreement, we need to close out the old agreement and consolidate the remaining funds that were in that agreement with the new additional $1 million. There were supposed to be listed 3 attachments to this agenda bill. I don't know quite why, technical error, the budget ordinance wasn't listed as an attachment, but it actually was an attachment in the packet. So we have 2 motions today, and one is to move to close out the grant agreement and open the new grant agreement, and the other has to do with approving the budget ordinance.
So on that one, the third would be approving the budget ordinance, or is that the second motion?
The second motion.
Okay, so the first one is
closing out the
and
old grant agreement and authorizing the mayor to execute the new grant agreement with the consolidated funds.
Okay. Committee? Yes, Michael.
I'll be supporting this change, but I just want to know how far along will this be getting us in the cleanup project? It seems like this is all for the engineering phase for that project.
No,
okay.
it's for construction also.
Okay.
Not full construction, but it is for the end of the remedial investigation and feasibility study, and then design and permitting, and part of the construction.
Okay, and so before we had some, what do you call them, intermediate actions?
Interim action.
Interim
That's
actions.
Right.
Are we actually now into the final action phase?
So I will be coming back to City Council probably sometime in late April or early May to update you on the status of the project itself. But just a short summary now is that we are almost completed with the feasibility study. And once Ecology has a chance to review our final draft, that RIFS, the Remedial Investigation and Feasibility Study, will be going out for public comment. And if there is comment that necessitates change to the document, changes will be made. Otherwise, that draft will be turned into a final, and engineering, design, permitting can begin.
Okay. Roxanne?
I move that we close out the existing remediation grant agreement and enter into a new grant agreement with the Washington State Department of Ecology for partial funding of the remediation of the R.G. Haley site.
Okay. So we have a motion before us. Any comments? All those in favor of this motion, answer aye.
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 Okay. And now
then we have to do a second one.
Yep.
I move the budget amendment for this project.
Budget ordinance.
The budget ordinance for this.
Approving the budget ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion before us. Any comment? Jack?
Procedurally, the fact that it's not been posted in the agenda packet, does that represent a problem as far as us voting on that tonight?
It actually is in the packet. It just wasn't noted on the list of attachments.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other comments? All those in favor of getting another $1 million? All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Well, that one was easy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Bring us more of those. Okay, our next item up today is an update on efforts to minimize inflow and infiltration within cities' sanitary sewers collection system.
Thank you. Good morning, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. This item is for information only. And as you may recall, when the council adopted the sewer comprehensive plan in 2009, there was quite a bit of focus on how to address inflow and infiltration into the sanitary system. And inflow is where you have direct connections where surface or stormwater is directly tied into the sewer system. And infiltration is where that groundwater or stormwater gets into the pipes through leaky pipes or cracks in manholes and infiltrates into the system. Bellingham used to have a combined system where we had direct connections into the sanitary system. Most of those have been removed. We still deal with I&I, and so we have one combined system overflow down on C Street that is permitted through the Department of Ecology. And when we went through the sewer comprehensive plan and looked at growth projections over the 20-year period, at that time we identified the need to deal with I&I over the 20-year period, and the plan actually identified building storage in the collection system as the preferred alternative to doing that. So building a big tank that would help us deal with wet weather events where we have peaking in the system that's beyond the conveyance system and even Post-Point's ability to deal with it. But with a lot of discussion with the community and the council, there was a big emphasis put on getting the I&I out of the system. Rather than building storage, let's put our focus on removing the I&I through efforts like main replacements and replacing laterals and going out and actively finding any connections that are made to the sanitary system and disconnecting those and hooking them into a storm system. So we've been doing that. The council has funded several projects that focus specifically on I&I, and we're back to provide an update on the results of specifically the pilot project we did in the Sunnyland neighborhood, where we went out and did replacement of side sewers and laterals all the way up to the house, and we have some information on how effective that has been. And we'll also provide an update on just our general everyday operations and what we do to minimize infiltration into the system. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to staff, and first up to speak is Mike Brock. He's our wastewater supervisor. He supervises all of the crews that are out working in the system every day. So, Mike.
Thank you. Mike Brock, Public Works, wastewater collection supervisor. As Ted mentioned, I'm here with Craig Mueller, Public Works project engineer, to provide an update regarding inflow and infiltration into the sanitary sewer system. Inflow is a direct connection of surface water into sanitary sewer. Infiltration is groundwater that is infiltrating its way into the wastewater system. Craig will be providing an update on the Central Basin I&I pilot project that was specifically designed to reduce I&I in a controlled area with a goal of obtaining measurable results. I would like to spend just a few minutes updating you on improvements we have made to better target and reduce I&I as part of our routine maintenance into our wastewater collection system. One of the strategic things we have done is to start documenting I&I as a rated deficiency in our video inspection program. Video inspection of our sewer infrastructure is done on an ongoing basis and is a key function of our maintenance program. The photo shown above was taken from the inside of our video inspection truck as an operator documents and notes pipe conditions. Due to recent software upgrades, we are now able to rate I&I as a deficiency that is included in the overall pipe condition. A pipe condition assessment can then be used for future planning of sewer main replacements and other capital projects. In addition to using this information for future capital projects, it is also used to prioritize repairs that can be completed by city staff. In the last few years, we have started using a trenchless repair system to do point repairs that previously would have been disruptive and costly. In the photo above, an employee is in a sewer manhole preparing to install a trenchless repair. If we find an area in a sewer main that has a small area of infiltration, but the overall condition of the sewer main is in fair condition, we will repair that small area of infiltration, lengthening the lifespan of the pipe and delaying the need for replacement. The photo on the left is an example of I&I, or infiltration, leaking through a joint in a sewer main. The photo on the left is the trenchless repair after the repair was completed. In conjunction with video inspection of main lines, we have also implemented a manhole inspection program. Deficiencies are noted in a similar fashion to that of the mainline inspection program, with I&I as one of the criteria taken into consideration. When I&I is identified, it is documented and scheduled for repairs by city crews. Recently, we have started using a new sealing method that has proven to be very effective at stopping infiltration in sewer manholes. In addition to our inspection programs, I&I is also targeted and working closely with engineering staff, assisting with smoke testing, dye testing, and flow monitoring. And although we have made improvements in reducing I&I into the wastewater system, we will continue to seek ways to address this issue. I'll now turn it over to Craig for an update on the Central Basin I&I project.
Good morning. Craig Mueller, Public Works, project engineer on the Central Basin Inflow and Infiltration Project, otherwise known as the Sunnyland I&I project. In 2011-2012, a project was done in the Sunnyland neighborhood whose objective was to determine if rehabilitation, complete rehabilitation of the conveyance system was a better, more cost-effective solution to detaining peak weather flows or expanding treatment capacity to detain peak wet weather flows. And this was accomplished by choosing an area in the Sunnyland neighborhood, also known as the Central Basin. It's approximately 40 city blocks. That was divided into two. Half was, I have one right here. Half was a control area, which is located to the east of the shaded area. The shaded area is our pilot area. This area of approximately 20 city blocks received new sewer mains, new sewer services, as close to the homes as we could get them, and I'll get more on that here in a minute. New manholes, any cross-connected catch basins or roof drains were also taken from the system. In this project area, there were 343 properties involved, and that were connected via sanitary sewer services to the system. After more than a year of outreach, we had gotten right of entry forms from 247 of those properties. In order for a property to participate in this project, we needed to have a signed right of entry form which authorized the city and the city's contractor to replace the sanitary sewer service on that particular property. Of the 247 properties, which is 72% of those of the total, we relined or replaced 225 sewer services, and of the total of 343, there were an additional 31 that had been replaced previously with modern materials in the recent past. So those were not candidates for replacement as part of this project. And all told, 74.6% of services within the project area have been replaced. Some of the key benchmarks in it, the total project cost was just under $3 million. There were 8,700 feet of sewer main replaced, 14,446 feet of individual services, that's 225 individual sewer services, for a total of approximately 4 miles of pipe replacement. We also removed 4 catch basins that were cross-connected to the sanitary sewer. They now flow appropriately to the storm sewer system, and we replaced 21 manholes. So the results of this: a year prior to construction, and a year following construction, there was flow monitoring done at 4 locations downstream of the pilot project area and the control area, both in wet weather flows and dry weather flows, so we can monitor the success and flow reduction. And depending on location, some are a little bit more representative of just the project area. Some have other flows from different areas coming into that point. But that flow volumes due to I&I were reduced by 77.5% to 92.2%. So it was a very effective method in eliminating inflow and infiltration from the system. So where do we go from here? Some of the results that we've seen from this, we've implemented by, as Mr. Brock has earlier described, that inflow and infiltration is now one of the contributing factors towards prioritization of sewer mains in need of rehabilitation. Prior to this, it was based on age, on condition, and the number of repairs that have been done to the system. And the prioritization was driven by the smoke testing, videoing, dye testing, all of the methods that Mike has previously discussed. So inflow and infiltration, in addition to age and condition, will also be now a contributing factor in the prioritization for replacements. All sewer replacement projects in town now will address any known sources of inflow and infiltration in the project areas. And where feasible, clay or concrete sanitary sewer pipes, sewer service pipes will be replaced from the main to the right-of-way with a clean-out located at the right-of-way. Basically, everything from right-of-way line to right-of-way line would be replaced wherever feasible in all future sanitary sewer projects.
Any questions?
Questions? Michael?
Let me start at the back and go forward. You say that now the amount of I&I is going to be used in the prioritization to switch over to replace the mains. And I know that we chose this whole area, control half as well, because we already knew there was probably a fair amount of I&I, older pipes. Given the new prioritization, what about the other half? Is the other half that was the control area going to be very high on our list of the next areas to hit?
Yeah, it will likely come towards the top of the list. We have the next several years programmed out. We have projects that need to be done in conjunction with other capital projects. For instance, we'll be focusing down in the Happy Valley area in conjunction with the Padden Creek daylighting project. We have some other locations this year that we'll be doing more spread out throughout the city that were identified as priorities for various reasons, I&I certainly being one of those. But I think it would be reasonable, I don't have the exact time, but that this other side of the project area would be fairly high on the list and done sometime in the near future.
Was there an advantage in doing an entire area together like this? This is like 26 blocks. Is there an advantage in doing large chunks as opposed to a street here and a street there? Even if they are a bad stretch, is there an advantage to inconveniencing the neighbors all at once, so to speak?
Yeah, there certainly can be, both in terms of notification to the neighborhood, but also some economies when it comes to bidding and construction. But like all of our projects, there's other factors to consider as well. We certainly need to be mindful of other corridor projects that we're doing, areas where we're already inconveniencing the neighborhood, working on another utility or sidewalk work, and we always try to combine our projects and take advantages of that, be opportunistic, but always an advantage if you can keep in one location, all the way from flagging and traffic control to mobilization, as well as you pointed out, it certainly helps in terms of notifying the neighborhood.
Roxanne?
I'm just curious about how the lifeline of the infrastructure is improved. Like, how much longer will our infrastructure last with this?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to the engineers in terms of the life expectancy of the new infrastructure you put in.
The life expectancy of the new pipes is, you generally plan on a 100-year lifespan. It should be in excess of that, as many of the materials that we replaced, at least in the Sunnyland area, dated from 1905 to 1908. So they are in excess of 100 years old. And based on the videos, yes, there was I&I, there was leakage, there mainly at the joints. I hope I look that good at approximately 110 years old. It had issues and needed to be replaced, but the materials that are going in now are of a lot. The joints are a lot better. There's gaskets included. They're sealed a lot better than the previous clay and concrete piping. So you should get a minimum of 100 years out of these.
Thank you.
Jack?
Ted had a comment.
I did want to let the council know that we have not had an overflow event now for the last 5 years down at C Street. So a lot of factors go into that. You know, obviously the weather conditions, but I think we're certainly doing a good job on I&I, and we're going to continue down this path. Sometime in the near future, we're going to have to look at the comprehensive plan, go back to the Department of Ecology and update our comprehensive plan, because our 20-year capital plan still shows building collection, storage in the collection system. We're certainly not moving towards that. We're moving towards being more aggressive with I&I, and would like to at some point go back and modify that capital plan, remove the storage in the collection, so we're not going to build the big wet weather facility, but rather use our capital money on projects like the one that Craig just went over with council. So sometime, I don't know the date yet, we've been in contact with Ecology, and they certainly know where we're going in terms of our priorities.
Anything?
So I get kind of confused sometimes, because you can read percentage reductions in different ways depending on what the bases are and exactly what you're measuring. So just as an arbitrary example, if the baseline was that there was like 1,000 gallons being released into the system, is it now that it's anywhere from 80 to 230 gallons are now being released because of this reduction, or is there a different way of measuring this
Sort of.
percentage?
If, for example, if there was a flow of 1,000 gallons per minute during the wet season, we would look for a rain event during both before and after construction of approximately the same amount, and then adjust so they are equal. But then you subtract the base flows during the dry period, which should be relatively the same before and after construction, because those are when you don't have sources of I&I coming into the system. And then you look at the difference between the wet and the dry as being your additional unwanted materials. So how closely after construction your wet weather flows are to your dry weather, if that makes sense.
Okay, I guess I understand that part of it. I guess I'm just wondering, you know, say like in a storm event, there's 1,000 gallons being released.
Yes.
What does it look like before and after, even subtracting out the dry base?
92%. Sorry if I can do this in my head, but you would be dealing with 20 gallons per minute instead of 1,000.
The reduction there is on the I&I flow, not the base flow. So we didn't reduce the total flow from the area in total. It's just the reduction in the I&I volume. So there's still I&I flowing into the sewer mains. We've reduced it by that 70 to 90%.
Okay, and that excess that is continuing to be released into the system, that's coming from the people that didn't sign up, you think?
It could be coming from people who didn't sign up. It could be coming from just flow coming into from the surface into the tops of the manholes. That there will always be some element of an I&I into the sewer mains, but reducing it to that degree of a percentage shows that the project was relatively successful and what we would have expected.
And then the last question is, I'm hearing from what you're saying is that you're interested in wanting to go and make sure that the city system or the city side of it from the right-of-way, that we're tightening up everything as we move along, but you're not thinking about doing additional side sewers, private side sewers?
At this point, our big change is we're going to go to the right-of-way. So historically, when we went through and did a main replacement or upgrade. We just did the main itself. And we started looking at the connections of the side sewer into the main. We did the one project where we went all the way to the home. What we're suggesting now is that we'd like to try going to the right-of-way. And remember, in the city system, from the main to the house is privately owned, even though it's in the right-of-way. It's not the city's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the adjacent property owner or the abutting property owner, which is not always the case in all utilities, but that's the way it is in Bellingham. We would like to go to the right-of-way. It's the easiest construction. You're doing the lateral. We think we can pick up the highest percentage of I&I by going to the right-of-way line at the most cost-effective way. That last piece from the right-of-way to the house is very expensive, very disruptive, takes a lot of time to coordinate, but we have full control of the right-of-way. It's something we can do as just part of our general construction without getting a right of entry from the neighbors and without disrupting yards and going underneath garages and all the things we had to do in Sunnyland, which made it very challenging. We'd like to try that for a while and see if we're accurate in our assumption that we're going to get the bulk of the I&I right there. We can always revisit it. We'll come back to council, and if at some point the direction is go all the way to the home, then we can certainly do that. But we're trying to maximize the sewer utilities revenue and get the most I&I, basically the best bang for the buck, and we'd like to try going to the right-of-way.
So without an issue about cost at all, as far as the amount of I&I, the private side sewers versus the public side sewers, what percentage are one versus the other? I mean, I can understand that it might cost a lot for the private, but are we talking 50-50, or is it?
I don't think we can hazard a guess at that, to be honest with you. It's
well, given that pilot project.
Again, I would not be able to say one side or the other, what the benefit is one to the other. The real challenge is try to maximize how much money we're spending, how much time it's taking to develop the projects, and keeping within our ability to control that from the right-of-way to the right-of-way line. There's going to be I&I from both the side, from the property line to the house and from the property line to the main. There will be I&I on both sides of that. You can get more on the private side when it's connected to the roof drain, or if it's just shallow. But on the street side, it goes deeper, and there's more water available, and that's tend to be where the water collects is on the street side. So it's a bit of a not really unknown at this point. But if we think that we'll probably get the biggest bang for the buck by staying within the right-of-way line. Excuse me.
There's a couple other things that we're going to be doing in conjunction with this. We talked a little bit about smoke testing, where we go out. We do smoke testing. That helps us identify where folks do have those cross connections, roof drains or whatever. We've notified property owners, but we haven't been really aggressive at enforcement. That's something that we'd like to do, spend more time working with the property owners, saying we've identified this and following up to make sure that the disconnections are made. That's one thing we'd like to do. And then we're also looking at other programs that would incentivize the private property owner to do the side sewer themselves. And we've talked about this at council before, that other jurisdictions have taken ordinances forward that say upon the sale of a house, for instance, you have to do a side sewer inspection. If it doesn't pass a certain criteria, then it would be a requirement of the sale of the home that the side sewer be upgraded. So there's things that we can pursue on the private property side, maybe in conjunction with the strategy of the city focusing on the mains, the manholes, and the laterals to the right-of-way. So we'd like to pursue some of that, see if we can be just as effective as going to the house, but in a more cost-effective way.
Okay. Anything else? I just want to say something with Jack. Jack, I want to thank you, because you've been really diligent over the years on this I&I issue, you know, and you've pursued it and you stayed on it, and this study is kind of showing you why this was an important issue to stick with. And
so and what I'm hearing is that you're thinking that during our next comp plan of the sewer plan, that we would not be advocating for the C Street overflow?
Yeah, that's our goal, that we could remove the need to build that large wet weather facility. It was very expensive, as you know, in the $20+ million range. Can do a lot of improvements to the collection system for that. It will require working with ecology and having ecology approve the fact that we can show we can meet our goal. Our permit requirement with ecology is that we're allowed one overflow on average per year throughout our 5-year cycle. As I had mentioned, we haven't had an overflow for 5 years, so we're heading in the right direction, we believe. But we're always going to have some permit requirement from ecology that limits the number of overflows we're allowed to have. And if we can show we can keep our overflows to within the permit requirements by doing things like we've highlighted today, rather than building a wet weather facility, then we believe ecology will approve a comprehensive plan that doesn't have the wet weather facility in it.
Michael.
Thanks. I want to echo exactly what you said, thanking Jack. You were one of the leaders on this. I think these results indicate an enormous success. I mean, the reductions of 77 to 92%. But I kind of had the same problem that Jack did, trying to work out the numbers on the cost and benefit, because you know, the benefit you just now mentioned is the saving of the $20 million plus for a new, wet weather facility. In addition, I believe there's operational savings down at the sewer treatment plant. And I know the cost is very clear, $2.9 million, but the benefit wasn't quite in dollars, because it talked about 2.54 gallons, saving $36,000 per year at dry base flows. But what's it'd be nice if the numbers were to be rerun to show just how big the payoff is, just in terms of the money savings, because I think it is an enormous success. So we have the benefits in terms of flow reduction, the cost in terms of dollars. It'd be nice to have a dollars to dollars, because I think it's going to look tremendous. Operational savings and wet weather facility savings, that's $30 million there over a 10-year period.
Yeah, and we can certainly look at maybe a different way to present it. I will say, when you look at it strictly on a financial basis, we don't quite get there. We don't quite show that it's cheaper. Actually, what we show is we can't quite remove enough, because there's not enough opportunities to go through and replace all of the mains and side sewers to necessarily get where we need to do under our peak situations. But we'll take a look at it. We believe it's very positive, and it's something we should be pursuing, and we'll look at if there's a different way to present it. Craig's done a nice job going through the numbers, and I know he has all the information, so we can look at if there's a different way to present it.
I think the numbers are in there. I just don't have the way to translate it and include, as you say, the long-term capital savings over, say, a 10 or 20-year period. Thank you.
Okay, Roxanne.
I just really, really want to thank the department for doing this work. It's really important, and the results are really tremendous. And I also want to express appreciation for the fact that the pilot took place in Sunnyland, because I just think this is just one more way we can show just how the city cares about all of our neighborhoods, especially emerging neighborhoods. So thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks for the report.
Thank you very much.
The next item up is the request for variance to allow night paving on Alabama Corridor Multimodal Safety Improvement Project.
Thank you. We will be moving forward with the Alabama Corridor project in 2015, and as you recall, it's a project that includes not only pedestrian improvements, I think additional 6 crossings across Alabama. We'll be putting in our first HAWK systems, pedestrian activated signals, as well as enhanced crossings that we're familiar with. But it also requires, or will include, an element of resurfacing the entire stretch of Alabama, which will also have with it redoing all of the intersections, the ADA ramps, all the concrete work that's a requirement of any time we pave. Given the volume on Alabama, it will be very disruptive to traffic. We're going to be having lane closures. We would like to do some of the paving work at night to allow traffic to flow a little bit better during the day. It is a residential area. It does require a variance, a noise variance from council. We believe there'll be a significant cost savings by doing it at night, as well as just a convenience factor to the traveling public. So it is the department's recommendation that we would do the paving work at night. So we do request that variance, and it does take council action.
Great. Michael.
I would move approval to allow the variance on noise.
Okay, we've got a motion. Any comments? Yes.
Will we be doing outreach to the folks that live right on that street?
We will, yeah. We'll be. We've got a good mailing list that includes both property owners and the residents, and we've been fine-tuning that as things are coming back to us. But yeah, the whole stretch will be notified of the paving. We'll also use our variable message boards for the general traveling public, so they'll know that there'll be work going on. We did have a construction meeting last week, so the word is getting out, we hope. We've been working with the neighborhood associations as well, and they're helping us to distribute that information. So hopefully everyone will know it's coming, and we'll work to find alternative routes, because it will be disruptive. It's 19, 20,000 vehicles a day under normal conditions. That will be down to, at the best, reduced lanes. And so we want to make sure people are aware, but doing it at night will certainly improve on that. I think when we pave and we're able to do it at night, and we can go much quicker and minimize that disruption and the noise. Eric did mention to me it will likely be a little bit more than just paving, and so I do want to be clear about that. We may need to do some planing of the asphalt at night as well, but it's generally going to be a paving project and everything that goes along with that. We'll be doing work through the day too, with reduced lanes, but this will help us, I think, speed the project along.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes 3-0. We'll recommend approval tonight. Next item up is a recommendation to reject all bids for the Towards Net Zero rainwater harvesting retrofit of the Public Works Operations Facility.
Thank you. Thank you. Several years ago, the city was successful in getting a grant from the Department of Ecology for a pilot project over at our Pacific Street Public Works Operation Facility to do some rain catchment, rainwater harvesting. The idea was that we would take the rainwater off of our sheds and buildings, put it into a tank, and use that water to fill up our Vector trucks and our sweepers, and show that that can be successfully done. It has been a challenging design, to say the least. We finally got something that we thought would work within our budget, put it out to bid, and unfortunately, all of the bids exceeded our budget by a significant amount. So what we're requesting is that council reject all bids. We will go back to the drawing board to see if we can perhaps find a project that does work, that's cost effective, and also shows what can be done with rainwater harvesting. And so we're not entirely giving up on the project, although I will say it's turning out to be much more expensive and challenging than we would have hoped. We will look at the opportunity to combine it with another project that we're doing at Pacific Street that's dealing with water quality of our surface, our yard. But at this point, we need to reject all bids as a requirement, and we've asked Department of Ecology for a bit of an extension to figure out what we want to do.
Okay. Committee?
I'll just move to deny the bid award.
Okay. Any comments? Jack?
What was the engineering estimate? I saw that 200,000 was budgeted, but what was the engineering estimate itself?
It's 199. Isn't there 190?
I don't recall. I think it was around $200,000 is what the engineer's design estimate was. The original grant application, original scope of work was for $170,000. They've spent about $50,000 on design, so there's $120,000 of that grant and city money available to match. So we're short about $160,000 on the low bid price.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Michael?
Just to clarify, the motion is to reject all bids?
Yes. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. We'll recommend that tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. The next is discussion of proposed Department of Ecology rules on water quality.
Good morning, Brian Henrich, Mayor's Office. This was this agenda item followed, I believe, earlier, late January. Council approved a letter in support of some legislation related to a chemical action plan as proposed by the governor. There's still a rulemaking process going on, however, in the Department of Ecology, and the two components they do work hand in hand. And you'll see in the packet there's the governor's proposal. There's also some additional materials that Michael provided, including a guest editorial as well as a white paper on a briefing. And then the draft rule itself is the last item. And so if I understand correctly, What council would like to do is submit a comment letter to Ecology by the March 23rd deadline at Ecology. That's also a council date. And I just wanted to also point out that the administration has been in support of the governor's approach on this issue. And so I guess I'd turn it back to you on what direction you'd like to go.
Wait. Confused. I think, didn't we take a vote at previous to sign on with the mayor on the letter?
That was for the legislation that was before the legislature. So again, there's
So I'm trying to.
yeah, there's two processes going on essentially. There's the legislative process. The governor proposed with Ecology some legislation really articulating his approach and Ecology's approach around chemical action plans, so identifying what those chemicals that they'll try to address. And then there's the administrative side, which Ecology has a rulemaking which sets the standard. The standard in this case at a high level is 175 grams per day of fish consumption, in addition establishing an acceptable cancer risk standard of 10 to the minus 5, which I think is better understood as 1 in 100,000.
Okay. Roxanne.
Well, this was a major concern for me. It's going to be really hard for me to talk about this right now because today is Billy Frank Jr.'s birthday. And so tribes throughout Washington state have taken the day off to honor Billy Frank and everything that he did for water quality, for fish and for shellfish and for tribes, to make sure that there would be fish and shellfish for everyone. So when this was brought forward, I felt really frustrated because I wasn't allowed to say something that's really concerning to me about this legislation. It's the simple fact that tribal members of the Asian community and other people of color consume 10 times the amount of fish and shellfish of the average person. So when you reduce the cancer risk, then you are increasing the risk for these people of color that they will get cancer. So I don't necessarily think the governor's goal is to kill me as a member of the Nooksack Indian tribe, but I'm really worried about the education that we need to do with our community. If the governor wants to do his work down in Olympia with this and not set high enough water quality standards, which is my main concern, what I need to do is then educate our community about what the consequences of this will be. So we were just hoping, Michael and I have been talking about this, that the council might be willing to write a letter that would be more supportive of higher water quality standards, especially since Bellingham is such a community that supports the environmental side of this water quality.
Good. Michael?
Thanks, Roxanne. I didn't realize it was his birthday, so thanks for letting me know. Brian helped explain it pretty well. There was a legislative process that had to do with identifying the top chemicals that get into our stormwater, and the governor's plan to develop chemical action plans for, I think, the top 6 threats or something like that. We're already in support of that. And there's a rulemaking process now that gets a little bit more technical, and there's this rulemaking comment process. And so what Roxanne and I would like the council consider is just submitting a comment letter to that second phase, to the rulemaking phase. It really has, the actual proposal is in our packet, and it really comes down to page 65, where there was a footnote that was struck, footnote number 6, and a new footnote, footnote number C. So, I mean, we're really into the weeds here. But that change is going from a cancer risk rate of 1 in a million to 1 in 100,000. It basically is a more lax standard because you have to see a larger increase in risk before it triggers the regulatory problem. So it's really technical, but I think that we can draft a letter which basically points out to that one issue, which is the cancer risk rate. So I'm going to make a motion that we recommend the council approve a letter with these basic bullet points. A letter to Ecology for the rulemaking process. This is a motion. It will be a motion, which says our support for the governor's comprehensive approach to stormwater and water quality, support for the revised fish consumption standards, which are already in the rulemaking, but also support for the original protective cancer risk rate, and that we might mention the equity issues that Roxanne mentioned, as well as be realistically mention the fact that there will be financial challenges for ourselves and every other jurisdiction to meet those standards. So I would move that we write a letter along those lines.
Just a question on it. Are you asking staff to draft the letter, or do you wish to draft the letter, or what? Because this motion is
yeah.
is that letter. So
I want
so
approval of the
need to
concept. My guess is that Brian and I work together pretty well. If we have good bullet points, I think Brian could draft an excellent letter in that regard. I don't know, Brian, how do you feel?
We can give it a shot. Yeah,
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so the motion is to draft the letter.
Yeah, to clarify, I guess that would need to come back at our next meeting for approval, or we could approve that it, you could sign it. I don't know how you want to do the approval, but we haven't seen the draft yet.
Okay, if I could suggest that you draft the motion to be to draft the letter and then bring it back so that we can read the letter before approval, because it's really, I have a hard time approving anything I haven't seen yet.
Right.
If that's okay, because I can vote on this one and say, okay, but I want to see the letter.
And I think we can include that in the packet for the 23rd, which will allow council to ideally adopt, and then we could submit, we could adopt before the comment period closes on the 23rd. Does that seem reasonable?
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that'll work really well.
Okay, and then one other comment, Michael, if we vote on this today, and we're going to approve this, it's going to be 3-0 to do the letter, would you write up those points so I can describe them tonight?
For this evening, yes.
Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. We'll recommend that tonight to the full council. Thank you, Michael and Roxanne. The next item is a proposed donation of Padden Lake Hill Stormwater Facility to the City of Bellingham.
Thank you. There's a few items that are similar in nature, which is staff coming forward to council to request authorization to start the process to look at the potential for property that has been identified where someone wants to donate it to the city. The first one is it's a stormwater facility in the Padden Lake Hills area. And this is currently a privately maintained stormwater facility that serves a residential area, single-family lots, very unique in Bellingham. There's only, I think, 2 of these. Typically, single-family residential areas, the water quality facility, detention facility is dedicated to the city. The city owns the tract that the facility sits within, and the city owns and is responsible for maintenance of the actual facility. We go out and inspect it, we maintain it, make sure that it meets water quality standards, and ultimately that the water that is discharged from the facility into the city's conveyance system is of the appropriate water quality. As I mentioned, this one is privately owned and maintained. The homeowners association approached the city and requested that they would like to donate the property and, in essence, donate the facility to the city so that the city would take over the property ownership and maintenance of the facility. We believe from a stormwater management perspective, this makes sense. I think it's a better model to have these facilities in public ownership. It guarantees that we will go out and inspect it and maintain it. Ultimately, it's all about the water quality. Ultimately, the city has some responsibility, as this is always discharged into our system and does fall under our broader NPDES permit through ecology. So we would like to pursue it at least. This is the first step of when we deal with donation of land. It requires the council to authorize us to start the process, which will be going out and conducting a phase 1 environmental assessment. We want to make sure that there's nothing there that we don't want to take on the liability in addition to just the maintenance of the facility. So that is what we're requesting. Moving forward with phase 1 environmental, we anticipate that the cost won't exceed $4,000. We'll go forward, get that information based if we receive council's approval, and then come back to council with a recommendation as to whether or not we should take over ownership and maintenance of this facility. So any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer.
Michael.
So this is an unusual circumstance. You say that normally when these detention facilities are built by a developer, we'll get ownership of it right away.
Yeah.
What is the economics of that if it worked the normal way, and how does that relate to the economics now? it seems like, you know what I'm saying? Each time we acquire this wonderful asset, but we now have to maintain it. Is
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, so
how
there'll
do we
be,
pay for that now? Is that paid for with SDCs and other charges? How do we do it under the normal circumstances?
Right.
And therefore, how can we pay for it under these different circumstances?
yeah, so it's a good question. So under a typical situation, someone's building a new subdivision. They have to meet all of our water quality standards, which is going to require a stormwater facility, a detention pond, or potentially a vault, but most likely a pond. They build it to our standards. They then dedicate it to the city, just like they do water mains and sewer mains and street and sidewalk that they build. So it becomes part of the city's owned infrastructure. So they pay for the cost of construction. They also pay for system development charges for stormwater, and then all of the lots within the subdivision will pay the ongoing annual or monthly stormwater fee. That's really no different in this situation. This is an older facility, so I don't know what the system development charges would have been at the time. But whether a facility is privately owned or publicly owned, they still have to pay system development charges. There's no difference in what they pay. It's just like if a developer builds a private street, they still have to pay all of the same fees as if it's a public street. The only difference is that it doesn't come over for public ownership. So I think the financial model is similar. I think what will happen in this case is currently we don't have the ongoing maintenance cost of this facility, so that's what will be new. But in terms of how it was built, how it was paid for, and what development-related fees were paid at the time, it's very consistent with what would happen with a typical facility that would be public throughout the whole process. So I don't see a real difference there. Again, the cost is going to be our ongoing maintenance. We've gone out, Eric's gone out with our stormwater folks and looked at the facility, and there may be some things that need to be done initially to bring it up to our standards. But I think we look at it from the overall stormwater, water quality, maintenance of the systems, protection of the neighborhood. This facility actually works in concert with a couple facilities that are above it that are publicly maintained. So we have a couple public stormwater facilities up the hill that then the water comes down into this privately owned facility. Then it goes back into the public system. I think it just makes some good stormwater management sense for it to be in public ownership. But we still need to do our due diligence. But I think to your question, Michael, there's really not a lot of difference.
So this facility, the next one, they feed, I don't know, 15, 20 nearby houses. Each of those houses is paying a stormwater fee, and some portion of that would have been intended for maintaining the stormwater in the area.
That's correct.
They're already kind of paying on going into the system.
Yeah, they're kind of already paying for it. I mean, everyone, into every residential stormwater rate, there's a component for O&M, ongoing maintenance of both any kind of residential facility that's specific to water quality from their area, as well as general conveyance, fish passage, the larger issues that everyone pays for on a regional basis. So I think you're right. They're already, in essence, paying for the maintenance of the stormwater system as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Roxanne, motion.
I move, excuse me, I move to authorize the department to do an environmental site assessment of the Paden Hills stormwater facility.
Okay. All those in favor, answer aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Okay, motion passes 3-0. We'll recommend approval tonight. So I see we got two more. These are basically the same.
Very similar. This one's slightly different in that this is over off Donovan and 22nd Street stormwater facility where someone, it was a privately owned parcel or is a privately owned parcel. I believe it went into default and someone purchased the property. Speculative, thinking that maybe they could develop it. It's got a stormwater facility on it and is not currently being maintained. Mm-hmm. It's similar in the same nature that the city believes that it'd be in the public's interest for this to be in public ownership and that the city would go on and maintain it in perpetuity. So similar in that regard, and the request is the same in that we would like to do additional due diligence on this and then come back to the council.
Okay. Any comments from council? What's the council's wish? Do I have a motion?
I will move to authorize staff to obtain an environmental site assessment for the 22nd Street stormwater facility.
Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Recommend approval tonight. And our last item is proposed donation of property south of Birch Street to the city of Bellingham.
Yes, and again, similar in nature. This one, the city was approached by a property owner that owns a little under an acre along the Birch Street right-of-way. It's undeveloped right-of-way. They would like to donate this property back to the city to make the right-of-way whole through there. We always look at the opportunity to have right-of-way. We don't have any plans necessarily to extend Birch Street, or we don't have plans to extend Birch Street, but the opportunity to reinstate the right-of-way, opportunity for potential transportation, whether it's trail or street or utilities, is probably worth pursuing, and again, would request approval to move forward with the Phase 1 assessment and then come back to council.
Okay. Michael?
So this one's not stormwater related, at least not at the moment. There's no reason to it. I'm wondering, Parks isn't here, there are trails in the area. Is Parks going to look at that also?
Yeah, I think it would be a right-of-way for any city use. Yeah, you can see in your packet, the map shows that's the Ridge Trail. That's a very popular access point for Galbraith. There is a bit of a trailhead right now at the end of the improved Birch Street. Mountain bikers and hikers access the Ridge Trail. On Galbraith, you can see that it's right adjacent to the right-of-way, so there could be an opportunity for recreational access there, utilities, whatever. Like I said, there's no plan, but the opportunity to regain the right-of-way is probably worth pursuing from the public's interest, at least staff recommends so.
Okay. Jack?
I don't know, I'm not quite sure about what the topography is of that section that's being donated, but could that be also gravelled and maybe provided for some sort of parking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I will say that the Ridge Trail itself, so the dashed green line, you should take your bike up there, Jack. That's a bit of a grinder, man. But Birch Street, itself, that right of way is not as steep. It's a little bit flatter and could be an opportunity for something like that. I can't speak with certainty on that, but opportunity might be there.
Michael?
Again, Ted's right up in the spot, kind of a Parks question. That trail looks like it goes across the back half of private property at the moment.
It's been rerouted, so that's Skiers has a development up there. He's been developing that section of Birch Street, and when that was built, there's access rights through there.
Okay.
So there is. So that trail is not, or it's through an easement. And then there's other trails that come down through there as well that have been rerouted a little bit to accommodate the plat, because there's entitlements there and they're developing, and as they do, easements are being provided, and so the trails are authorized and allowed to go through there. That particular section of Birch Street, we can certainly follow up with Leslie and see what the arrangement is for those trails coming down.
Yeah, because I know that the city's been looking at access points much further south to Galbraith, using some greenways money, potentially for some easements as part of a larger deal involving the county. Mm-hmm. I guess I assume that this would be included as a northern, in the long-term planning process, that this would need to be considered. And maybe I'm thinking this Birch Street could give us enormous opportunities for, as Jack says, some kind of, angle and parking facility, so we do not keep impacting the neighborhood, because there is no official facility there right now. Yeah,
there's at the very end of Birch Street, there's about 5 or 6 parking stalls that were developed as a trailhead, but you're right. I think one of the goals of what the county and the city are working on is to take some pressure off Birch Street, because it does have some pressure there. So I will, between now and tonight's meeting, follow up with Leslie and make sure that I accurately represent their position on it.
Yes, Roxanne.
So I move to authorize staff to obtain an environmental site assessment of the property south of Birch Street through Jones Holding Company.
Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. We'll recommend approval tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That's the end of committee.